In this video, I'm going to talk about these two statements. So the first one says x approaches infinity. The second one says x approaches negative infinity. So to explain that, let's take a look at a coordinate plane. So x approaches infinity would be on this side of the graph. This is saying x is getting larger and larger. So I'm moving towards the right. X approaches negative infinity would be on this side of the graph. This is saying x is getting smaller and smaller, or you can think of it as being more negative, so I'm on the left side of the graph. So the first one, if I want to write this out, would say x approaches infinity. And so another way of thinking about that is x is getting bigger and bigger. So I can think of it as first x is equal to 100, and then it's equal to 1,000, and then 10,000, and then 100,000, and then 1,000,000, etc. But it's going to keep getting bigger. If I want to write the second one out, this is saying x approaches negative infinity. Another way of saying that is x is getting smaller and smaller, or it's becoming more negative. So if I think of that in terms of numbers, I could say first I'm at negative 100, and then negative 1,000, and then negative 10,000, and then negative 100,000, and negative 1,000,000, etc. And then it'll just become smaller and smaller. If I want to take a look at it on a graph, if I ask myself, as x approaches infinity, I want to know what's happening to y. So what's y doing? So if I take a look at this linear equation, and this is the equation y equals x, as x approaches infinity, that means I'm heading towards the right. So in this graph, if I head towards the right, I ask myself, what's y doing? So as x gets bigger and bigger, this graph is going up, 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 and up. So as x gets bigger and bigger, y is getting bigger and bigger. Now, if I want to know what happens as x approaches negative infinity, I'm on the left side of the graph. Another way I can think about this is as x becomes smaller. So as I go towards the left, and I trace the path on this graph, so as x gets smaller and smaller, this graph is going down, 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 so it's going further down. So as x gets smaller, y is also getting smaller. So I can think about this direction being y. It's approaching infinity, and if it's heading in this direction, y is approaching negative infinity. So y is getting larger, y is getting smaller. As I think of it in terms of a table, so this says y equals x, so first x equals 100, y equals 100. X equals 1,000, y equals 1,000. X equals 10,000, y equals 10,000. So I can see as x is getting bigger and bigger, y is also getting bigger and bigger. So when I take a look at this graph, now I'm going to say as x gets smaller, so I have negative 100, y is negative 100. Negative 1,000, y is negative 1,000. Negative 10,000, y is negative 10,000. So I can see as x is getting smaller and smaller, y is getting smaller and smaller. Let's change this up a little bit. What if I were to take a look at the graph instead of y equals x, I'll take a look at y equals negative x. So now, first thing I'm going to do is sketch that graph. And so for y equals negative x, instead of heading this way, it's going to head this way. So now as I head towards the right, I'm going to trace out this graph. So as x is getting bigger and bigger, so as x heads off to the right, this graph is going down. It's going further and further down. So as x approaches infinity, y is getting smaller. It's approaching negative infinity. And as x approaches negative infinity, so as I head towards the left, and I'm going to trace it out in this graph. So if I head this way and I'm following it on the path of this graph, as x approaches infinity, this graph is going further and further up, so y is getting bigger. Then if I take a look at it on the table of values instead, and so now I'm going to change it to my new equation, which is y is equal to negative x. So when I plug in 100, I get negative 100. When I plug in 1,000, I get negative 1,000. When I plug in 10,000, I get negative 10,000. So I can see as x is getting bigger and bigger, y is getting smaller and smaller. So like we said before, as x approaches infinity, y is approaching negative infinity. Now let's take a look at what happens using the table of values as x gets smaller and smaller. And I'll go ahead and write my new equation. So we have y is equal to negative x, or the opposite of x. So when I plug in negative 100, I get 100 out. When I plug in negative 1,000, I get 1,000 out. When I plug in negative 10,000, I get 10,000 out. So I can see as x is getting smaller and smaller, y is getting bigger and bigger.